And this is an interesting, if dark, piece of the tower's history. Spies shot at the Tower of London during World War One. And interestingly enough, all these spies that were shot at the tower during World War One, they're all buried in East London Cemetery. Karl-Heinz Lodi is the only one of which to have his own grave or own grave marker. The others are all supposedly buried in the same grave and have one marker. But yeah, it would do, and they were buried secretly, apparently in the evening when it would have been nice and quiet, because don't forget, these people at the time were classed as the enemy, and they were being buried in the same soil as many of the men they'd helped to kill, and women and children they'd helped to kill. But these are the German spies. Karl-Heinz Lodi, who was the first, and as I say, he has his own grave for that reason. And you've got Karl Friedrich Müller, Wilhelm Johannes Roos, Heike P. Johansen, Ernst Waldemar Mellin, Augusto Alfredo Rogan, Fernando Buschmann, George Trugot Briekow, Irving Guy Rees, real name unknown, Albert Mayer, Ludwiko Hurwitz Ye Zinder. And the last one, who was a Second World War spy, he was the last person to ever be executed at the Tower of London, is Josef Jakobs. And they still have the chair in which he was shot. You can see the bit of it which is blown out. And that is over in the White Tower. So, yeah, join me for that bit. And here, ladies and gentlemen, is that chair in which Josef Jakobs was executed. First World War, and he was the spy that they executed. A frightening and sobering object. And the break in the back of the chair there is where the bullets went straight through Josef Jakobs' heart and blew the back of the chair out. Windsor Chair. Jakobs was executed early on the 15th of August 1941 in the tower's small rifle range. This was formerly between the Martin and Constable Towers. Due to the lower height of the range's bullet catcher, Jakobs had to be seated, hence the damage to this chair's back. Jakobs was the tower's final state prisoner and the last person to be executed at the tower. Scots Guard and the firing squad, drawn from the Tower garrison, were armed with Lee Enfield rifles when they executed Jakobs. The Lee Enfield rifle was the principal weapon of the British infantry soldier from the late 19th century until the 1950s. There's that rifle and that chair. So that's Josef Jakobs. And here is Karl-Heinz Lodi on trial. Karl was the first man to be captured and executed as a spy during the First World War at the Tower of London. And here are the men themselves. Each photo is marked with the man's name and date of execution. And we've seen the Second World War chair that Josef Jakobs was executed in, and this is the chair that the First World War spies were executed in. This chair disappeared between the war years of First World War and Second World War, and the rumour is, even from some of the beefeaters, that the chair was broken up and sold in little pieces to souvenir hunters. This is the miniature rifle range in which the spies were executed. And this is the interior of that miniature rifle range, and right at the very far end is where the chair would have been placed, where each man would have been executed one after the other in the First World War as they came along, and then Josef Jakobs, our very last man in the Second World War. And here he is, Josef Jakobs, the last man to be executed at the Tower of London, and the Tower of London's last state prisoner. And now on to their last resting places. And here is the grave of Karl-Hans Lodi, the first man shot at the Tower of London. First World War, of course. As I say, he's got his own grave, or own grave marker. I've read and heard disputed rumours that they're not actually buried in where they're marked, because don't forget, these men were spies, so they were buried very quietly and secretly. But whether he is here or not, this is where he's remembered. Karl-Hans Lodi. I can't point you too much and get too wide an angle shot because I'm next to graves that are fairly modern. And the one next to me is a baby, so I'm not going to be filming that one, not too close. But yeah, that's Karl-Hans Lodi. And onto the graves of the other spies. They're all mentioned on the one stone, so onto that one now, off we go. And here is the grave and grave marker of the other spies. As you see, Lodi has his own grave, but these gentlemen are all mentioned on the same stone, and it's nearly worn away now. It shows up a lot better in the winter time when the stone's damp. But yeah, that's the spot. And I remember this when I was a little boy. It was all covered over, like all at the back, with ivy. So the cobbles around the edges, a newer thing they've done that nice. Yeah, that's the World War I spies at the tower, everyone. Hope you've all found this one interesting and informative at least. But they were the enemy once, but there we are. Everyone pays their debt. They've paid their debt, certainly, haven't they? So yeah, let bygones be bygones. So says I. Take care all, and thank you for watching. And here we see roughly where the grave of Josef Jakobs is. It's Kensal Green Roman Catholic Cemetery. Now, in the 1970s, they had run out of burial space. So what the cemetery did was to take away all the old common gravestones. If Jakobs had one, that would have been amongst them. Then this area of the cemetery was covered over with 12 foot of soil, so they could allow for new burials. But the wooden cross there, which isn't a marking for Josef Jakobs, underneath there, very, very deep down, is the approximate spot where Jakobs was buried, and he was the last man to be shot at the Tower of London.